A little workshop in Blackpool quietly started constructing something very different in the late 1950s, when Britain's roads were still lined with modest saloons and useful family automobiles. It lacked the resources of Britain's well-known sports car brands and was not supported by a massive manufacturer. However, this tiny, handcrafted vehicle would eventually turn into one of the most crucial vehicles for TVR's survival. The vehicle was the 1958 introduced TVR Grantura. It stood out from nearly everything else on British roadways because it was light, unusual, and constructed with unwavering independence. It is still one of the most underappreciated sports vehicles of its time, despite its significance. You must examine the Britain that created the Grantura in order to comprehend its significance. After the war, the nation was still rebuilding. The car market was split between utilitarian transportation and a few aspirational sports car manufacturers. Industry was rebounding, and exports were crucial. While businesses like Lotus were pushing the limits of lightweight engineering, well-known brands like Jaguar and MG already existed. However, TVR was much more delicate and tiny. The business hardly made it through each year. When Trevor Wilkinson founded TVR in the late 1940s, it was a tiny business that produced lightweight sports vehicles with parts from other producers. Wilkinson thought that neither a big engine nor a hefty body was much necessary for performance. Weight, balance, and simplicity were important. His guiding principle was to make the vehicle as light as possible while allowing the driver to experience every aspect of the route. That concept would be best expressed by the Grantura. The Grantura had an unexpectedly contemporary appearance when it debuted in 1958. Fiberglass, which was still a very uncommon material for road automobiles at the time, was used to make its body. In addition to producing elegant flowing designs that would have been costly to create with steel bodywork, fiberglass allowed TVR to maintain incredibly low weight. The car's tubular steel structure, which kept it sturdy and light, was located beneath its elegant exterior. Efficiency was key to the Grantura's overall ideology. It wasn't designed with luxury in mind. Rather, it was intended to be fast, responsive, and exciting to drive. However, the Grantura's adaptability might have been its most peculiar feature. TVR was not dependent on a single engine manufacturer. Instead, engines from manufacturers including Coventry Climax, BMC, Ford, and MG were used in various iterations of the vehicle. TVR was able to continue producing cars despite changes in supply chains thanks to this strategy, but it also meant that the Grantura was always changing. While some models were impressively fast for such a small automobile, others had limited power. Even relatively modest engines could produce lively performance because of its lightweight design. The Grantura felt Grantura has or faster than its stats indicated, according to many drivers. However, the Grantura was never as well made as more established producers. TVR just lacked the resources to refine mass production. Every car was put together in tiny quantities, frequently by hand, and the quality of each one could differ. Early Granturas gained a reputation for being thrilling but occasionally problematic. The chassis design changed multiple times as the manufacturer attempted to improve weak parts, while the fiberglass bodywork occasionally experienced structural problems. Every improvement took time and money, which were frequently scarce for a tiny business like TVR. However, for those who purchased them, these defects frequently added to their allure. Drivers seeking something new were drawn to the Grantura. These were enthusiasts who were more interested in the driving experience than in luxury. Many of the car's owners were weekend competitors or amateur racers who valued the vehicle's agility and small weight. In contrast to bulkier sports cars, the Grantura felt alive on winding British roads. The car had straight steering, reacted fast to inputs, and changed direction remarkably easily due to its low weight, IT felt more like a racing machine than a conventional road car to some drivers. IT was no coincidence that there was a relationship to motorsports. TVR has long thought that competition could demonstrate the power of its designs. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, Granturas made appearances in club racing competitions around Britain. They were competitive due to their lightweight and balance, even though they were rarely the most powerful vehicles on the grid. The future. Grantura has shown unexpected durability, particularly in endurance competitions. When privateer racers entered Granturas in long-distance events, the vehicles raced much longer than many had anticipated. This is one of the most famous tales from the company's early years. Because they were lightweight, effective, and technically simple, these little machines frequently won races against larger and better-funded teams. TVR's reputation was shaped in part by such moments. The notion that TVR produced serious drivers' vehicles started to gain traction despite the company's financial difficulties. However, there was never a guarantee of survival behind the scenes. During this time, little British automakers were constantly in a state of uncertainty. A single error may jeopardize the company's future, manufacturing numbers were modest, and funding was scarce. In the early 1960s, TVR went through several financial difficulties and ownership changes. The Grantura continued to be at the core of the company's identity despite all of this unpredictability. T underwent multiple iterations in an effort to get better than the previous one. To establish the optimal balance between performance and dependability, several engines were evaluated, suspension geometry was improved, and chassis designs were reinforced. The Grantura had developed into a far more powerful vehicle than the early models by the middle of the 1960s. However, the market for sports cars was evolving by that point. Expectations for build quality were growing, and new rivals were emerging. TVR was to endure, it needed something fresh. After the last Granturas were discontinued in 1967, the Vixen, the vehicle that would usher TVR into a new era, gradually replaced them. The Vixen improved the idea into a more comprehensive bundle while keeping a lot of the Grantura's principles. The Grantura had set the foundation for the Vixen's existence in many respects. In retrospect, the Grantura might not come up in discussions with the most well-known sports cars in Britain. It never became as well-known worldwide as some of its competitors, and it did not sell in significant quantities. However, its significance to TVR cannot be emphasized. The business might not have made it through the precarious early years of its existence without the Grantura. It demonstrated that a small manufacturer might use creativity and perseverance rather than enormous resources to produce a true sports car. Additionally, it introduced the notion that driving exhilaration was more important than comfort, elegance, or convention, a concept that would define TVR for decades to come. The Grantura wasn't flawless. It represented the constraints of a tiny business operating against the odds and required patience from its proprietors. However, for those who experienced it, the vehicle provided a unique link between the driver, the machine, and the road. Today, aficionados who recognize the significance of remaining Granturas cherish them. They serve as a reminder of a time when modest British workshops might subvert the status quo with little more than ingenuity and willpower. The Grantura quietly contributed to the rebellious spirit that would eventually define TVR's most well-known models. Because of this little fiberglass sports vehicle continues to have a distinct position in Britain's automotive history even after more than 50 years. Consider subscribing if you like learning about underappreciated vehicles like the Grantura and their backstories. There are a lot more amazing vehicles from the history of automobiles that should be honored.